Grace Anderson's knees buckled as another person brushed past her, without a glance. The concrete outside Miller's grocery was cold beneath her worn sneakers, and the Texas sun beat down mercilessly despite it being late October in Austin. Her throat felt like sandpaper, raw from hours of asking the same question over and over. "Please, sir, can you spare some bread? My little brother needs to eat." The man in the business suit didn't break stride. Grace watched his expensive shoes disappear around the corner, and something inside her threatened to crack completely. She'd been standing here since 6 in the morning. It was now past noon, and her stomach growled so loudly she pressed her hand against it to muffle the sound. This was her life now. 3 months ago, everything had been different. Mom had been alive. They'd had a small apartment that didn't smell like mold. Dad had been around, even if he was distant. Now Mom was gone. Dad had vanished 2 weeks after the funeral, and Grace was completely alone except for 8-year-old Ben, who was getting sicker every day. She could see her reflection in the grocery store window. Her blonde hair hung in tangles around her face. Her blue eyes were hollow, rimmed with dark circles. The red jacket she wore, once her favorite, was now stained and frayed at the cuffs. She was 19 years old and looked 40. "Miss, you need to move along." The security guard had told her this 3 times already. His voice was gentler than his words. "You're blocking the entrance." "I know, I'm sorry." Grace's voice cracked. "Just a few more minutes, please." The guard sighed and walked back inside. Grace knew she was pushing her luck. Last week, she'd been escorted off the premises of another store. The week before that, someone had called the police. The officer had been kind but firm. If she kept this up, she'd be arrested for panhandling. But what choice did she have? Ben was at home right now, curled up on the mattress they shared in their condemned apartment building. He hadn't eaten anything but stale crackers in 2 days. The property manager had stopped caring whether tenants had working utilities. Their electricity had been cut off last week. The only reason they still had water was because the building was too old for individual shutoffs. Grace had tried everything. She'd applied for food assistance, but the paperwork was overwhelming and she didn't have proper documentation for Ben since Dad had taken all their papers when he left. She'd gone to churches, but they'd given her emergency food boxes that ran out within days. She'd looked for work, but nobody would hire someone with no address, no references, and a little brother who needed constant care. This morning, Ben had woken up with a fever. His breathing had been shallow, rattling in his thin chest. Grace had held him close and promised she'd get food today. She'd promised she'd make everything better. She was failing. A young woman with a baby stroller approached the entrance. Grace took a breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me. I'm so sorry to bother you, but do you have any spare change? Anything at all? My brother is sick, and we haven't eaten in days." The woman's face softened with sympathy, but she shook her head. "I'm sorry, honey. I don't carry cash anymore. Everything's on my card." Grace nodded, fighting back tears. "Thank you anyway." "Have you tried the shelter on 6th Street?" the woman asked. "They might be able to help." "We went there." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "They were full. They said to come back next week." The woman looked pained but didn't know what else to say. She hurried into the store, and Grace sank down to sit on the cab, her head in her hands. This was it. She'd hit the absolute bottom. There was nowhere left to fall. She thought about Ben's face this morning, so pale and small. He tried to smile at her, tried to tell her everything would be okay. An 8-year-old boy trying to comfort his older sister because he could see she was breaking apart. "I'm sorry, Ben," Grace whispered to the empty air. "I'm so sorry." She should get up, should go back to the apartment and figure out what to do next. Maybe she could find something to sell. Maybe she could check the dumpsters behind restaurants again, though the thought made her stomach turn. She'd done it twice before, and both times she cried the whole way home. A shadow fell across her, blocking the harsh sunlight. Grace looked up slowly, expecting the security guard again. Instead, she saw a young man, maybe late 20s, with kind brown eyes and dark hair. He wore a simple blue button-down shirt and jeans, nothing fancy, but his clothes were clean and new. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you okay?" The question was so absurd that Grace almost laughed. Was she okay? No, she wasn't okay. She was about as far from okay as a person could get. But she'd learned that people didn't really want honest answers to that question. I'm fine, she said automatically, starting to stand up. Sorry for blocking the sidewalk. Wait. The man held up his hand. Don't go. I heard what you said to that lady. About your brother. Grace froze. Her heart started pounding. Was this person going to call social services? Would they take Ben away from her? She couldn't lose him. He was all she had left. Please, she said, her voice shaking. Please don't call anyone. I'm taking care of him. He's safe with me. We just need some food, that's all. I'll figure everything else out. I'm not going to call anyone. The man's voice was steady and calm. My name is Christopher. What's yours? Grace hesitated. Every survival instinct told her not to trust strangers. But what did she have left to lose? Grace, she said quietly. Grace Anderson. Grace, when's the last time you ate? The simple question broke through her defenses. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. I don't know. Yesterday? Maybe the day before. I gave Ben everything we had left. Christopher knelt down so he was at her eye level. His expression was serious but compassionate. How old is your brother? 8. He's 8 years old and is sick, and I don't know what's wrong with him, and I can't afford a doctor, and I can't even get him proper food, and I promised my mom before she died that I'd take care of him, but I'm failing. The words poured out in a rush, all the fear and desperation she'd been holding inside for months. You're not failing, Christopher said firmly. You're fighting. That's not the same thing as failing. Where is Ben now? At home. Our apartment. It's not far. Can you take me there? Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Why? Because I want to help. Christopher stood up and held out his hand. I want to help both of you. Will you let me? Did you ever wonder what you would do in Grace's position? Have you ever felt completely hopeless? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to hear what happens next. Grace stared at his outstretched hand. This was the moment. She could walk away, refuse the help, keep struggling on her own. Or she could trust this stranger and maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Okay, she whispered. Okay, yes. Please help us. Christopher's car was nicer than anything Grace had ever ridden in, but he didn't act like it was special. He opened the passenger door for her and waited until she was settled before going around to the driver's side. The interior smelled clean, like leather and something faintly citrus. Which way? He asked as he started the engine. East, Grace said quietly. Toward the old industrial area. It's about 10 minutes from here. As they drove, Christopher glanced over at her. Tell me about Ben. When did he start getting sick? Grace twisted her hands in her lap. About 2 months ago. Right after Dad left. At first I thought it was just grief, you know? We'd lost Mom, then Dad disappeared. But it got worse. He's tired all the time. Can't keep food down when we do have it. And his breathing is getting harder. Has he seen a doctor at all? Just the free clinic. Once. They said he needed tests, but we'd have to go to the hospital for that, and we don't have insurance anymore. Dad canceled it when he left. Her voice went bitter on that last part. Christopher was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. Okay, first things first. We're going to get some food for both of you. Then I want to take Ben to see a doctor. A real one. Grace's throat tightened. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to. But I don't understand. Why would you do this? You don't even know us. Christopher turned down a side street, following her directions. Does it matter why? Yes, Grace said honestly. It matters to me. He pulled into a parking spot near the entrance to the decrepit apartment building and turned to face her fully. My dad died when I was Ben's age. Heart attack, completely unexpected. My mom was 24 years old with 2 kids and no job skills. We were about to lose everything. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. A stranger helped us. A businessman who'd known my dad casually. He paid for my dad's funeral, helped my mom get training, connected her with job opportunities. He didn't want anything in return. He just helped because he could. What happened to your family? Grace asked softly. My mom got back on her feet. She worked hard and made sure my sister and I had everything we needed. She always said that kindness saved us, and we should pass it forward whenever we could. Christopher smiled, though there was sadness in it. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. But I think about what she taught me every single day. Grace felt tears threatening again. I'm sorry about your mom. I'm sorry about yours. Christopher reached over and squeezed her shoulder briefly, a gesture of comfort. Now, let's go meet Ben. The apartment building looked even worse than usual in the afternoon light. Graffiti covered the lower walls, and several windows were boarded up. Grace saw Christopher take it all in without comment as they climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The stairwell reeked of urine and rot. We're at the end of the hall, Grace said quietly, feeling shame creep up her neck. I'm sorry it's so bad. I've been trying to find somewhere better, but everywhere wants first and last month's rent plus deposit, and I just don't have that kind of money. You don't need to apologize. Christopher's voice was gentle but firm. None of this is your fault. Grace unlocked the apartment door, which stuck a little before scraping open. The single room was dim with only light from the small window. Ben was exactly where she'd left him, curled up on the mattress in the corner, wrapped in the thin blanket they shared. Gracie. His voice was small and rough. You're back. Grace hurried over to kneel beside him. I'm back, buddy. And I brought someone who wants to help us. She felt his forehead and her heart sank. He was burning up. Christopher crossed the room and crouched down, giving Ben some space. Hey there, Ben. I'm Christopher. Your sister told me you haven't been feeling well. Ben's blue eyes, so much like Grace's, studied Christopher warily. Are you from the government? Are you going to split us up? No, Christopher said seriously. I'm just a friend. And I promise you, nobody is going to split you and your sister up. You two are going to stay together. He has a fever, Grace said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Christopher, it's really high. Christopher stood up quickly. Okay, change of plans. Ben, I'm going to carry you to my car. We're going to the hospital right now. Grace, grab whatever you both need. We'll get food afterward. For a split second, Grace wanted to argue. She wanted to say they couldn't afford the hospital, that they'd be turned away, that it was hopeless. But Ben's labored breathing shut down those protests. She nodded and scrambled to gather their few possessions into an old backpack. Christopher lifted Ben carefully, wrapping him in the blanket. Ben didn't protest, which scared Grace more than anything. He was always so independent, so determined to be brave. For him to accept being carried meant he really did feel terrible. The ride to Austin Children's Hospital took 15 minutes. Christopher called ahead on his phone while he drove, speaking to someone in calm, authoritative tones. This is Christopher Hayes. I'm bringing in a pediatric patient. 8 years old, high fever, respiratory distress, no insurance. I need your best team ready when we arrive, and I'll be covering all costs. Grace sat in the back seat with Ben's head in her lap, stroking his hair. You're going to be okay, she whispered. These doctors are going to help you. Everything's going to be okay. When they arrived at the emergency entrance, there was already a team waiting with a gurney. Ben was whisked away so quickly that Grace barely had time to give him a reassuring smile. A nurse gently guided her to a private waiting room, while another person took information from Christopher. 20 minutes later, a doctor in blue scrubs came in. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. I'm Dr. Mitchell. Ben is stable. We're running tests now, but I can already tell you some good news. This is treatable. Grace felt the room tilt. Christopher caught her elbow, steadying her. What's wrong with him? She managed to ask. He has pneumonia, which is serious but manageable with proper treatment. But that's not the underlying issue. Dr. Mitchell sat down across from them. From what I'm seeing, Ben has been malnourished for some time. His immune system is compromised, which is why the infection took hold so aggressively. He also shows signs of anemia. With proper nutrition and medical care, he can recover fully. How long will that take? Grace asked. He'll need to stay here for at least 3 days on 4 antibiotics and fluids. After that, ongoing monitoring and a strict nutritional plan. He'll also need supplements and follow-up appointments. Dr. Mitchell looked at Christopher. I understand you're covering the costs. Whatever he needs, Christopher said without hesitation. Money isn't a concern. Just make him better. The doctor nodded and turned back to Grace. You can see him in about an hour. He's sleeping now, which is what he needs most. After Dr. Mitchell left, Grace turned to Christopher. Her hands were shaking. I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Christopher pulled out his phone. But we need to talk about next steps. Ben needs a stable place to recover. Your apartment isn't suitable, even temporarily. I want to help you find somewhere better. I told you, I can't afford anything decent. I know. That's why I'm going to help. Christopher held up his hand when she started to protest. Grace, listen to me. You're a good sister. You've been fighting so hard for Ben. But you can't do this alone, and you don't have to. Let me help. Let me make sure you both have what you need. Grace thought about arguing. She thought about her pride, about not being a charity case. But then she thought about Ben's pale face, his struggling breaths, and she knew what mattered more. Okay, she said softly. Okay, yes. We accept your help. Thank you. Thank you so much. Christopher smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. You're welcome. Now, you mentioned you haven't eaten in days. Let's go to the cafeteria and fix that while we wait to see Ben. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Maybe, just maybe, things really could get better. The hospital cafeteria was bright and clean, a stark contrast to the dark corners Grace had grown used to. Christopher insisted she get a full meal, and for the first time in weeks, Grace didn't have to ration every bite. She ate slowly, savoring the simple turkey sandwich and vegetable soup like they were gourmet food. When's the last time you slept? Christopher asked, watching her over his coffee. Grace had to think about it. I don't know. Really slept? Weeks, maybe. I'm always listening for Ben, making sure he's breathing okay, making sure nobody breaks into the apartment. Christopher's expression darkened. That place isn't safe. It's all we could afford after Dad left. He took everything. The bank account, Mom's life insurance money, everything. Grace stirred her soup absently. I know you said you'd help us find somewhere better, but I need you to understand something. I need to be able to take care of us eventually. I can't depend on charity forever. I'm not offering charity, Christopher said quietly. I'm offering a hand up, not a handout. There's a difference. And yes, I want to help you get to a place where you're independent and stable. But right now, in this moment, you need help. There's no shame in accepting it. A nurse appeared at their table. Grace Anderson, your brother is awake and asking for you. Grace stood so quickly she almost knocked over her chair. Christopher followed as she hurried back to the pediatric ward. Ben was in a private room, propped up on pillows, with an IV in his arm and an oxygen monitor on his finger. He looked tiny in the big hospital bed, but his color was already better than it had been that morning. Gracie. His voice was stronger. They gave me pudding. Grace laughed through sudden tears and rushed to hug him carefully, mindful of the wires and tubes. Pudding. Huh. That's pretty good. Chocolate. Ben grinned, then noticed Christopher in the doorway. Hi. Hey, buddy. Christopher came closer. How are you feeling? Tired. But better. The doctor said I have to stay here for a few days. Ben looked worried. Is that okay? Can we afford it? Grace opened her mouth, but Christopher spoke first. It's all taken care of. You just focus on getting better. That's your only job right now. A social worker arrived shortly after, a woman named Patricia who wanted to discuss Grace and Ben's living situation. They moved to a consultation room, leaving Ben to rest. I've reviewed your case, Patricia said, her tone professional but not unkind. Grace, you're 19. You're legally Ben's guardian in your father's absence. Our mom put it in her will, Grace said quietly. She got sick fast. Cancer. She knew she didn't have much time. She wanted to make sure Ben stayed with me no matter what. Patricia nodded. That helps. But I need to be honest with you. Your current living situation is unacceptable for a child. If you return to that apartment with Ben, I'll have to file a report with Child Protective Services. Grace felt her world tilting again. But I don't have anywhere else to go. Actually, Christopher said, I've been making some calls. I have a property that's available. A small house, 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. It's in a safe neighborhood with good schools nearby. Patricia raised her eyebrows. Mr. Hayes, you understand that I need to verify this is a legitimate situation. Of course. I'll give you all the documentation you need. Christopher pulled out his phone and started typing. I'll send you the property details, proof of ownership, and references. Grace and Ben will have a safe, stable home. Grace stared at him. Christopher, I can't accept a house. It's not permanent ownership, he explained. Think of it as extended-term housing while you get back on your feet. No rent, but you'll be responsible for keeping it clean and maintained. That's all. I don't understand why you're doing this. Christopher looked at her steadily. Because someone did it for my family once. Because Ben deserves a chance to be a kid, and you deserve a chance to be a young woman instead of carrying the weight of the world. Because it's the right thing to do. Patricia was typing notes on her tablet. If this checks out and the house meets safety standards, I won't need to pursue removal. But I will need to do periodic check-ins to ensure Ben's welfare. That's fine, Grace said quickly. You can check on us whenever you want. I have nothing to hide. After Patricia left to make her calls, Grace turned to Christopher. I still can't believe this is real. It's real. He smiled. And there's more. The house is near Austin Community College. I looked at their programs. They have financial aid for students in your situation and flexible scheduling that would let you take classes while Ben's in school. You want me to go to college. I want you to have opportunities. What did you want to study before everything fell apart? Grace hadn't thought about her dreams in so long. Education. I wanted to be a teacher. I love working with kids. She laughed softly, sadly. Seems like a long time ago. It was only a few months ago, Christopher said gently. Grace, you're 19. Your life isn't over. It's just been on hold. Let's get it started again. Over the next 2 days, while Ben recovered in the hospital, Grace's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Christopher arranged for movers to collect their few belongings from the condemned apartment. A local church group that Christopher contacted provided Grace with new clothes, toiletries, and other essentials. Pastor James Wilson from Grace Community Church came to visit Ben in the hospital. He was a warm man in his 50s with a ready smile. Christopher told us about your situation, he said to Grace. Our congregation wants to help. We've put together some care packages for you, and we'd love to have you join us for services if you're comfortable. I don't have anything to give back, Grace said softly. Pastor Wilson shook his head. The church isn't about transactions. It's about community. You've been through a storm. Let us help you find shelter. On Ben's 3rd day in the hospital, Dr. Mitchell cleared him for discharge. His lungs are clear, she said with satisfaction. The antibiotics worked perfectly. He'll need to take it easy for another week, but he should make a full recovery. I want to see him back here in 2 weeks for follow-up. Christopher drove them to their new home that afternoon. Grace held Ben's hand in the back seat, both of them quiet as they drove through neighborhoods that looked like something from a movie. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained houses, children playing in yards. It's here, Christopher said, pulling into the driveway of a modest 2-story house painted pale yellow with blue shutters. A small front porch had 2 rocking chairs. The lawn was freshly mowed. Ben pressed his face to the window. We get to live here. We get to live here, Grace confirmed, her voice breaking. Inside, the house was perfect. Not fancy or elaborate, just clean and safe and warm. The living room had a comfortable couch and a TV. The kitchen was small but had everything they needed. Upstairs, there were 2 bedrooms, each with a bed, dresser, and desk. Ben's room had been decorated with blue walls and space-themed bedding. Someone from the church set up the rooms, Christopher explained. They wanted it to feel welcoming. Ben ran from room to room, his energy returning. Grace stood in the hallway, covering her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. "There's food in the fridge and pantry," Christopher continued. "Enough for about 2 weeks. After that, I've arranged for you to receive assistance through the community program until you're on your feet." Grace turned to him. "How do I ever repay you?" "You don't repay it. You pay it forward. When you're stable, when you're doing well, you help the next person who needs it." Christopher smiled. "That's how it works." As they stood in that bright, clean hallway, with Ben laughing in his new bedroom, Grace felt something shift inside her. She'd accepted help. She'd let kindness in. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, it was just beginning again. The first week in the new house felt like a dream Grace was afraid to wake from. She'd pinch herself sometimes, standing in the kitchen making breakfast on a stove that actually worked, or sitting on the porch in the evening watching Ben play in the small backyard. It was real. This was actually their life now. Christopher came by every few days, checking in but never intrusive. He'd brought Ben some books, noticing how much the boy loved to read. He'd helped Grace figure out the enrollment process for Ben to start school in a week. "How's he doing?" Christopher asked on his third visit, finding Grace in the kitchen trying to plan meals for the week. "He's getting stronger every day. His appetite is back, and is not tired all the time anymore." Grace smiled, real joy in her expression. "He's acting like a kid again. I forgot what that looked like." Ben came running in from the backyard, holding a dandelion. "Gracie, look, can we make a wish?" "Absolutely." Grace took the flower and held it carefully. "What should we wish for?" "I already know," Ben said seriously. He took the dandelion back, closed his eyes tight, and blew. The white seeds scattered in the sunlight. "I wish that we could stay here forever." Grace pulled him into a hug. "That's a good wish, buddy." Later, after Ben went upstairs to read, Christopher brought up a subject he'd been thinking about. "I talked to Dr. Mitchell yesterday. She says Ben's follow-up appointment is next week." "I know. I have it on the calendar." She also mentioned something about counseling. "For both of you." Christopher's tone was gentle. "You've both been through trauma. Your mom's death, your dad leaving, the months of struggle. That doesn't just go away because your circumstances improved." Grace had been avoiding this thought. "We're fine now. We have a home, Ben's healthy. That's what matters." Physical safety matters, Christopher agreed. But emotional healing matters too. There's a counselor who works with the church, someone who specializes in grief and family trauma. Her name is Dr. Ellen Carter. She's offered to see you both, no charge. "Everyone keeps helping us," Grace said quietly. "I don't know why." "Because that's what community does. We help each other." Christopher leaned against the counter. "Grace, you've been in survival mode for months. You've been so focused on keeping Ben alive and safe that you haven't had time to deal with your own pain. It's okay to accept help with that too." Grace thought about the nightmares she still had. About her mom's face in those final days. About the morning she woke up and found Dad gone, just a note on the table, saying he couldn't do this anymore. About all the nights she'd cried silently, so Ben wouldn't hear. "Maybe you're right," she admitted. "Maybe we do need help with that part." The following Monday, Grace and Ben had their first session with Dr. Carter. She was a woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and an easy manner that put them both at ease. Her office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs. "I'm not here to fix you," Dr. Carter said after introductions. "Because you're not broken. You've survived something incredibly difficult. I'm here to help you process it and move forward." Over the next hour, she talked with them both separately and together. Ben drew pictures while he talked about Mom. Grace found herself telling stories she'd kept bottled up inside. When they left, Grace felt lighter somehow, like she'd set down a weight she'd been carrying. "Can we come back?" Ben asked in the car. "Yes," Grace said firmly. "We can come back." Ben's follow-up appointment with Dr. Mitchell went perfectly. "His lungs are completely clear," the doctor said with satisfaction. "No lingering effects from the pneumonia. And his blood work shows he's responding well to the nutritional supplements. Keep doing what you're doing." That afternoon, Christopher took them to register Ben for school. Liberty Elementary was a good public school in their neighborhood, with a diverse student body and dedicated teachers. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, welcomed them warmly. "We're glad to have you, Ben," she said, shaking his hand seriously. "Third grade is a great year. You're going to make lots of friends." Ben looked nervous but excited. "What if I'm behind? I missed a lot of school last year." "Then we'll help you catch up," Mrs. Rodriguez said simply. "That's what teachers do. You just focus on doing your best." On Ben's first day of school, Grace walked him to his classroom. She'd braided his hair neatly and made sure his new backpack had everything he needed. His teacher, Miss Harper, was young and enthusiastic. "Welcome, Ben. I saved you a seat by the window." She smiled at Grace. "He's in good hands." Grace kissed Ben's forehead. "Have a great day, buddy. I'll be here to pick you up at 3. Walking back to the house alone felt strange. For months, Ben had been her constant companion, her purpose for getting up every day. Now he was in school, being a normal kid, and Grace had to figure out what came next for her. Christopher called later that morning. "How'd it go?" He was nervous but excited. "I think he's going to love it." Grace paused. "Christopher, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really stop that day? Outside the grocery store. You said you heard me talking to that woman, but there must be dozens of people asking for help every day in Austin. Why me? Why us?" There was a long silence. Then Christopher said, "Honestly, I don't know if I can explain it. Something about the way you looked. Like you were drowning but still fighting. Like you hadn't given up even though you had every reason to. I saw my mom in you. That same determination to protect your family no matter what. Your mom sounds like she was an amazing person." "She was. And she would have liked you." Christopher's voice was warm. "Listen, I have something I wanted to run by you. My company has a community outreach program. We work with local nonprofits to help families in crisis. I'd like you to come to the office tomorrow and learn about what we do." "Why?" "Because I think you'd be good at it. You understand what people in crisis need because you've lived it. Plus, it could be a job if you're interested. Flexible hours, good pay, meaningful work." Grace felt that flutter of hope again. "I'd love to. Thank you." That night, after Ben was asleep, Grace sat on the porch and looked at the stars. 2 weeks ago, she'd been sitting on cold concrete, begging for bread. Now she had a home, her brother was healthy, and she had opportunities opening up in front of her. She thought about what Christopher had said about paying it forward, about how kindness saved his family, and now he was passing that on. Grace made a promise to herself right then. She would get stable. She would build a good life for herself and Ben. And then she would help others the way she'd been helped. The journey wasn't over. There was still so much to heal and rebuild. But for the first time in months, Grace believed it was possible. Christopher's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel reaching toward the Texas sky. Hayes Technology Solutions occupied the top 3 floors. Grace felt out of place in her simple green dress, something from the church donation bag that fit well enough but was nothing fancy. "Mr. Hayes is expecting you," the receptionist said with a friendly smile. "Take the elevator to the 15th floor." Christopher met her at the elevator doors. "Grace, welcome. Come on. I'll show you around." The offices were open and bright, with employees working at sleek desks and collaborating in glass-walled conference rooms. Christopher explained that his company develops software for healthcare systems, helping hospitals manage patient data more efficiently. "We've been successful," he said simply. "And when you're blessed like that, you have a responsibility to share it." He led her to a conference room where 3 other people were waiting. "Grace, this is my community outreach team. Linda Torres runs our partnership with local food banks. Marcus Chen handles our housing initiative. And Rebecca Stone coordinates with local law enforcement on community safety programs." Grace shook hands with each of them, feeling overwhelmed. These were professionals with college degrees and experience. What could she possibly offer? Linda seemed to read her thoughts. "Christopher told us your story," she said kindly. "We're not looking for someone with a fancy resume. We need someone who understands what families in crisis actually need." That's right, Marcus added. I can run the numbers and manage the logistics, but I've never experienced what you have. Your perspective is valuable. For the next hour, they explained the community fund that Christopher had established. It provided emergency assistance to families in need. Housing, food, medical care, job training. Everything Grace and Ben had received, but on a larger scale, helping hundreds of families. We're looking for someone to be the face of the program, Christopher explained. Someone who can talk to the families we're helping, understand their needs, and advocate for them. Someone who can also share their own story to help raise awareness and funding. Grace felt her throat tighten. You want me to talk about what happened to us? Publicly. Only if you're comfortable, Christopher said quickly. But I think your story could help people understand why this work matters. It could inspire others to help. And it might give hope to families who are struggling right now. Let them know they are not alone. Grace thought about the months of shame she'd felt. The humiliation of begging for food. The fear that people would judge her for not being able to take care of Ben. But she also thought about that day outside the grocery store, how desperately she'd wished someone would see her, would care. I'll do it, she said quietly. If my story can help even one person, it's worth it. Linda smiled. Then welcome to the team. We'll start slow, get you trained on our processes. And Christopher mentioned you're interested in going back to school. I was thinking about it. Education, maybe. Teaching. Perfect, Marcus said. We work with Austin Community College. They have an evening program that would let you take classes while working part-time here. We can help with tuition. That afternoon, Grace went to the food bank where Linda volunteered. The warehouse was organized with shelves of canned goods, fresh produce, bread, and other essentials. Families came through with bags and boxes, and volunteers helped them select what they needed. We see about 200 families a week, Linda explained. Some are regulars who've been struggling for years. Others are people who hit a rough patch and just need temporary help. We don't judge. We just help. Grace watched a young mother with 2 small children selecting items. The woman looked exhausted, worried. Grace recognized that expression. She'd worn it herself not long ago. Can I help her? Grace asked Linda. Of course. Grace approached the woman carefully. Hi, I'm Grace. I volunteer here. Can I help you find anything? The woman looked suspicious at first, then resigned. I don't know what I need. We've never had to come to a place like this before. My husband got laid off last month, and we're behind on everything. I understand, Grace said gently. I've been exactly where you are. My brother and I went through something similar recently. It's hard to accept help, but there's no shame in needing it. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I feel like such a failure. You're not a failure. You're a mom who's doing whatever it takes to feed her kids. That's not failure. That's strength. Grace helped her select nutritious food, showing her what had helped when Ben was recovering. And this is temporary. Things can get better. I promise they can. As the woman left with her children, she hugged Grace. Thank you. Not just for the food. For understanding. Linda came up beside Grace. You're a natural at this. Over the next week, Grace threw herself into learning everything about the community fund. She met with families, listened to their stories, helped connect them with resources. Each person reminded her of her own struggle, and each one she helped felt like honoring the kindness she'd received. Christopher arranged for a local news station to do a story about the community fund. Grace agreed to be interviewed, though the thought terrified her. The reporter, Jennifer Kim, was professional but warm. Tell us about your experience, Jennifer said, camera rolling. Grace took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I was standing outside a grocery store begging strangers for bread for my 8-year-old brother. We were homeless, he was sick, and I'd lost all hope. Then a stranger stopped to help. He didn't just give us food. He gave us a future. She told the whole story, leaving out nothing. The shame, the fear, the desperate nights. But also the kindness, the community support, the transformation. When she finished, Jennifer had tears in her eyes. What would you say to someone who's in the position you were in 3 weeks ago? Jennifer asked. I'd say don't give up. I know it feels impossible. I know you're tired of fighting. But help is out there. People do care. Let them help you. There's no shame in accepting kindness. Grace looked directly at the camera. And to the people who aren't struggling right now, I'd say look around. See the person who's drowning. Be the one who stops. You might just save their life. The story aired that evening. Within an hour, Christopher called Grace. The phone has been ringing non-stop. People want to donate. Families are calling asking for help. Grace, you touched people. That night, Grace sat with Ben while he did his homework. He was thriving at school, making friends, bringing home perfect spelling tests. He looked healthy and happy, a normal kid living a normal life. Gracie, he said, looking up from his math worksheet. My teacher asked us to write about someone we admire. Can I write about you? Grace's throat tightened. Why would you want to write about me? Because you never gave up on me. Even when things were really bad, you kept trying. You kept fighting for us. That's what superheroes do. Grace hugged him close. You can write about me if you want. But you know what? We saved each other. We're a team. Later, after Ben was asleep, Grace went to her own room and opened her laptop. She'd enrolled in 2 classes at Austin Community College. Introduction to Education and English Composition. Classes started next week. Her new life was really beginning. She thought about the young mother at the food bank, about the fear and shame in her eyes. Grace opened a new document and began to type. She wrote about her experience, about the kindness of strangers, about hope. Maybe her words could reach others who were struggling. Maybe she could pass forward the light that had been given to her. The journey wasn't about forgetting where she'd been. It was about using that experience to help others find their way out of the darkness. The Austin Tribune article about Grace and the community fund ran on Sunday morning. By Monday afternoon, Christopher's office had received over 50 calls from people wanting to help. Some were offering donations. Others were families in crisis reaching out for assistance. Grace sat at her new desk in the community fund office, fielding calls with guidance from Linda. Each story was unique, but the emotions were always the same. Fear, desperation, the shame of needing help. This is Grace Anderson. She answered the next call. Hi, my name is Susan. Susan Phillips. The woman's voice trembled. I saw the article about you in the paper. About your brother and everything you went through. Yes, that was me. Grace kept her voice gentle. How can I help you? My daughter is 12. She has diabetes, and we lost our insurance when I got fired last month. I can't afford her insulin anymore. Susan started crying. I don't know what to do. She needs it to live. Grace's heart clenched. Susan, listen to me. You called the right place. We can help. Can you give me your information? Within an hour, Grace had connected Susan with the medical assistance program, arranged for emergency insulin supplies, and scheduled a meeting with Marcus to discuss temporary housing since Susan was also behind on rent. When she hung up, she felt drained but purposeful. Christopher stopped by her desk. You're doing great. I know it's overwhelming. Every person I talk to reminds me of us, Grace admitted. Every single one. And I keep thinking about how easily we could have fallen through the cracks completely. But you didn't. And now you're making sure others don't either. Christopher smiled. Speaking of which, I wanted to ask you about something. The mayor's office called. They are hosting a community forum next week about poverty and homelessness in Austin. They want you to speak. Grace's eyes widened. Me? Speak at a city forum. Your story matters. People need to hear it from someone who's lived it, not just from politicians and statistics. Christopher pulled up a chair. You don't have to do it if you're not comfortable. But I think you have something important to say. Grace thought about the young mother at the food bank, about Susan and her daughter, about all the invisible people struggling in silence. Okay, I'll do it. That evening, Grace started drafting her speech. Ben helped. Surprisingly insightful for an 8-year-old. Tell them about how you never gave up on me, he said seriously. Tell them that families need help to stay together, not to be split apart. That's really smart, buddy. And tell them about Mr. Christopher. About how one person helping can change everything. Grace ruffled his hair. You're pretty wise for a third grader. The community forum was held in City Hall, a historic building downtown. Grace wore a navy dress that Linda had helped her pick out, professional but not pretentious. Her hands shook as she waited backstage. The auditorium was full. City council members, business leaders, non-profit directors, reporters, and regular citizens. All there to discuss how Austin could better serve its most vulnerable residents. When Grace's turn came, she walked to the podium on trembling legs. She looked out at all those faces and took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I was invisible, she began. I stood outside a grocery store for hours, begging for food for my little brother, and hundreds of people walked past without seeing me. I wasn't a person to them. I was a problem, a statistic, a failure. The room was silent. I'm 19 years old. My mom died of cancer 4 months ago. My dad left. My 8-year-old brother got sick, and I couldn't get him medical care because I had no money and no insurance. I was about to lose him. I was about to lose everything. Grace's voice grew stronger. And then one person stopped. One person saw me. One person asked if I needed help. She told the story of Christopher, of the hospital, of the house, of the community that had rallied around them. I'm standing here today because someone chose kindness. Because someone decided that helping was more important than walking past. Because a community came together to give 2 kids a second chance. Grace gripped the podium. The question isn't why are there so many people who need help. The question is why are we, as a society, okay with walking past them? Why do we act like poverty and homelessness are individual failures instead of systemic problems that we all have a responsibility to address? She saw people nodding, some wiping their eyes. I'm not special. My brother isn't special. We just 2 people who got help at the right time. But there are hundreds, thousands more in Austin right now who are where I was 3 weeks ago. Desperate. Invisible. Giving up. Grace's voice broke slightly. We can choose to see them. We can choose to help. It doesn't take a billionaire. It takes a community that decides everyone deserves a chance. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Several council members came up afterward to shake her hand, to promise action. A businessman offered to match donations to the community fund. A non-profit director wanted to collaborate on expanding services. Christopher found her in the crowd. You were amazing. I was terrified, Grace admitted. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite the fear. He smiled. Your mom would have been proud of you. That night, Grace's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages. People thanking her for her words. People offering to help. Families reaching out who needed assistance. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Carol Martinez. I heard your speech tonight. 15 years ago, I was where you were. Someone helped me, and I've spent my life paying it forward. I run a transitional housing program for families. I'd love to meet with you and talk about collaborating. Thank you for telling your story. Grace showed the message to Ben before bed. See? This is how it spreads. One person helps another, who helps another. It's like ripples in a pond. Ben hugged her tight. I'm glad you're my sister. I'm glad you're my brother. Over the next weeks, Grace's life found a rhythm. She worked at the community fund 3 days a week, attended classes at Austin Community College 2 evenings a week, and spent weekends with Ben. Dr. Carter, their counselor, said they were both making remarkable progress in processing their trauma. Grace also started a blog, writing about her experiences and offering advice to others in crisis. Her raw honesty and practical wisdom resonated. Within a month, she had thousands of followers. One afternoon, Christopher invited Grace and Ben to his house for dinner. It was a modest home in a nice neighborhood, not the mansion Grace had expected. I'm not really into showing off, Christopher explained as he grilled hamburgers in the backyard. Money is a tool, not a status symbol. How did you become so successful? Grace asked. Hard work and a lot of luck, Christopher said honestly. And remembering why I'm doing it. After my mom died, I promised myself that I'd use whatever success I had to help others. Money doesn't mean much if you're not using it for good. Ben played with Christopher's dog, a friendly golden retriever named Ranger. His laughter filled the yard, pure and joyful. Grace watched him and felt grateful tears sting her eyes. "Thank you," she said to Christopher quietly, "for everything. For seeing us. For helping us. For believing in us." "You did the hard part," Christopher replied. "You survived. You fought. You accepted help when it was offered. That takes incredible strength." He flipped the burgers. "And now you're helping others do the same. That's what it's all about." As the sun set over Austin, Grace felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The road ahead was still long. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Ben, she had purpose, and she had a community that cared. Most importantly, she had hope. And hope, Grace was learning, was the most powerful force in the world. Grace was reviewing applications for the community fund when Linda knocked on her office door. "Someone's here to see you. He says he's your father." The pen dropped from Grace's fingers. "What?" "I can send him away if you want," Linda offered quickly. "You don't have to see him." Grace's mind raced. Richard Anderson. The man who'd promised to take care of them after Mom died, then disappeared with everything. The man who'd abandoned his children when they needed him most. Part of her wanted to refuse, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But another part, the part that had learned about grace and second chances over the past month, wondered if she should at least hear him out. "I'll see him," she said quietly. "But can you stay nearby? Just in case." Linda squeezed her shoulder. "Of course." Her father looked older than she remembered. He'd lost weight, and Grace streaked his brown hair. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes red-rimmed. "Gracie," he said hoarsely, "I saw you on the news. I saw the article in the paper." "So you know we almost died," Grace said, her voice cold. "You know your son almost died, because you left us with nothing." Richard flinched but didn't argue. "I know. I know I did an unforgivable thing." "Then why are you here?" "Because I need you to know I'm sorry. I need you to know why I left." He stepped forward hesitantly. "After your mom died, I fell apart. I started drinking, using drugs, anything to numb the pain. I was drowning, and I couldn't be what you and Ben needed. I thought you'd be better off without me dragging you down. So you stole everything and ran away." Grace's hands were shaking. "That was your solution." "I wasn't thinking straight. I was selfish and cowardly and wrong." Richard's voice broke. "I took the money because I needed it for drugs. I told myself I'd clean up and come back, but by the time I got into rehab, I'd lost everything. The money was gone. I'd burned every bridge. I figured I'd destroyed you both. You almost did. But you survived." Richard looked at her with something like awe. "You're 19 years old and you saved your brother. You did what I couldn't do. You fought." Grace wanted to hate him. It would be easier to hate him. But she'd learned something over the past month about carrying anger. It was heavy, and it didn't hurt the person you were angry at. It only hurt you. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back now?" "Because I've been clean for 6 months. Because I'm in recovery, and part of that is making amends to the people I've hurt. Because even if you never want to see me again, I needed you to know I'm sorry." Richard pulled out a business card. "This is my sponsor. He can verify I'm actually sober. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know the truth." Grace stared at the card. She thought about Ben, about how much he'd missed having a dad. She thought about Christopher's words about second chances. She thought about how she'd been given help when she didn't deserve it either. "I can't promise anything," she said slowly. "I can't promise I can forgive you or that Ben will want to see you. But I'm not going to shut the door completely. Not yet." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." "There are conditions," Grace continued, her voice firm. "You see a counselor. You stay in recovery. You prove that you're actually changing. And we do this slowly. I'm not letting you near Ben until I'm absolutely sure you won't hurt him again." "Anything," Richard said. "Whatever you need." After he left, Grace sat at her desk with her head in her hands. Linda came back in. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Grace admitted. "He seemed genuine. But he seemed genuine before too, and then he left." What does your gut tell you? Grace thought about it. That people can change. That sometimes they need help to change. That maybe giving him a chance is the right thing, even if it's risky. She called Christopher, needing his advice. He came to the office within an hour. Grace explained everything while he listened carefully. What do you want to do? Christopher asked. I want to believe him, Grace said. But I'm scared. What if he's just going to hurt us again? What if he's lying about being clean? Those are valid fears. Christopher leaned back in his chair. Here's what I think. You don't have to decide right now. Tell him he needs to prove himself. Set up boundaries. Maybe he attends family counseling sessions with Dr. Carter before he even sees Ben. Make him work for this second chance. That makes sense. And Grace? Christopher's expression was serious. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. It means releasing the anger so it doesn't poison you. But you can forgive someone and still protect yourself and Ben. Grace called Richard that evening. I talked to our counselor, she said. Dr. Carter is willing to meet with you individually. After a few sessions, if she thinks you're genuinely in recovery and no threat to Ben, we can try family counseling. But you don't see Ben until I say so. Those are my terms. I accept, Richard said immediately. Thank you for giving me this chance. Telling Ben was harder. Grace waited until after dinner, when they were doing dishes together. Hey, buddy, I need to talk to you about something. Ben looked up, sensing the seriousness in her tone. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. But Dad came to see me today. Ben dropped the dish he was drying. Dad? Where is he? Why didn't he come home? He's been sick, Grace explained carefully, using the language Dr. Carter had suggested. He was struggling with addiction, which is like a disease. He went away to get help. Now he's better, and he wants to try to be part of our lives again. Does that mean he'll live with us? Ben's eyes were wide, hopeful, and scared at the same time. No, not for a long time, if ever. We're taking this really slowly. He's going to talk to Dr. Carter first. If she thinks it's safe and good for us, then maybe you can see him. But only if you want to. Ben was quiet for a long moment. He left us when we needed him. I know. But you're letting him try again. I'm thinking about it. Because people deserve second chances when they are really trying to change. But I promise you, Ben, I won't let anyone hurt us again. We're safe. We're stable. That comes first. Ben hugged her tight. I miss having a dad. But I don't want to get hurt again. I know, buddy. Me neither. That's why we're being careful. That night, Grace lay awake thinking about forgiveness and second chances. About how Christopher had given them a chance when they were strangers. About how the community had rallied around them. About how she'd been teaching others to accept help and hope. Maybe it was time to practice what she preached. Maybe giving her father a chance to prove he changed was the right thing. But she'd do it carefully, protecting Ben every step of the way. The road to healing was long and complicated. But Grace was learning that sometimes the hardest part wasn't the struggle itself. It was learning to trust again after being broken. Dr. Carter's office felt different knowing Grace's father was sitting in the waiting room. Grace and Ben had arrived early for their regular session, and Richard was scheduled to meet with Dr. Carter afterward. This would be his fourth individual session with her. How are you feeling about potentially seeing your dad? Dr. Carter asked Ben. Ben twisted his hands together. Scared. What if he leaves again? That's a reasonable fear, Dr. Carter said gently. Grace, what about you? I'm scared too, Grace admitted. But I also wonder if I'm being unfair. He's been showing up to all his sessions with you. He's staying in recovery. Christopher verified it with his sponsor. Maybe he really is trying to change. Dr. Carter nodded. He is making significant progress. He's been honest about his mistakes and the harm he caused. He understands that he has a long way to go to rebuild trust. She looked at Ben. If you're willing, I think we could try a supervised session with just the three of us. You can leave anytime you feel uncomfortable. Your sister will be there the whole time. And I'll be there to make sure everyone stays safe. Ben looked at Grace. What do you think, Gracie? I think we can try, Grace said softly. But like Dr. Carter said, we can leave whenever you want. 20 minutes later, Richard entered the counseling room. He looked nervous, his eyes immediately finding Ben. Hey, buddy. Ben pressed closer to Grace but didn't hide. Hi, Dad. I'm so sorry, Richard said, his voice thick. I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry for everything. Why did you leave? Ben asked quietly. Dr. Carter nodded encouragingly. This was progress. Richard sat down carefully, keeping distance between himself and his children. When your mom died, I was so sad that I couldn't see anything else. I made bad choices. I started using drugs and alcohol to try to stop feeling the pain. But those things just made everything worse. They made me confused and selfish. I wasn't thinking about you and Grace. I was only thinking about myself. You took our money, Ben said. We didn't have food. I know. Richard's face crumpled. That was the worst thing I've ever done. I can't take it back. I can't fix what I did. All I can do is promise I'll never do it again. How do we know you'll keep that promise? Grace asked. Because I'm different now. I go to meetings every day. I have a sponsor who helps me stay clean. I have a job. I'm seeing Dr. Carter. I'm doing all the things I need to do to stay healthy. Richard looked at them both. I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed. That's all. The session lasted an hour. It was uncomfortable at times, painful at others. But by the end, Ben had moved slightly away from Grace, sitting on his own. Richard had answered every question honestly, even when the truth made him look bad. Can we try this again? Ben asked Dr. Carter. Another meeting like this? If everyone wants to, yes. Over the next month, they had 5 more sessions. Each one, Ben relaxed a little more. Richard told stories about when Grace and Ben were little, before Mom got sick. Gradually, carefully, they began rebuilding something that looked like a family. Christopher remained cautious but supportive. I'm glad he's making an effort, he told Grace over coffee one afternoon. But I'm also keeping an eye on the situation. If there's any sign he's backsliding, you tell me immediately. I will, Grace promised. I'm being careful. Ben comes first. Always. Richard had been working construction jobs, saving money. He'd found a small apartment near their house, but made no moves to see them outside of counseling sessions unless Grace initiated it. He respected the boundaries she'd set. One Saturday afternoon, Grace invited him to Ben's soccer game. It was a big step. Richard showed up early, standing at a distance from the bleachers where Grace and Christopher Saturday. When Ben scored a goal, Richard cheered loudly, and Ben's face lit up seeing his dad there. How's he doing? Christopher asked quietly, watching Richard. So far, so good, Grace said. He's been clean for 8 months now. He's working steady. He shows up when he says he will. She paused. I'm starting to believe him. Starting to think maybe he really has changed. After the game, Ben ran over to Richard. Did you see my goal? I saw it. You were amazing. Richard hesitated, then opened his arms. Ben hugged him briefly before running back to his teammates. That was huge, Grace said when Richard came over. Baby steps, Richard replied. I know I have a long way to go. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep showing up. Keep proving myself. 2 weeks later, Grace came home from work to find Richard's car in the driveway. Her stomach clenched with worry. They hadn't planned a visit. She hurried inside to find Richard and Ben sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework together. What's going on? Grace asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Dad called and asked if he could help me with my math homework, Ben explained. I said yes. Is that okay? Grace looked at Richard, searching his face for any sign of trouble. He looked sober, steady. I should have called you first, he admitted. I'm sorry. I just thought since Ben had that big test coming up, maybe I could help. Grace took a breath. This was a test, she realized. Not from Richard, but for herself. Could she trust him? Should she trust him? It's okay, she said finally. But next time, check with me first. I will. I promise. Later that night, After Richard had left and Ben was in bed, Grace called Christopher. My dad showed up today without asking. He was helping Ben with homework. Everything was fine, but I felt panicked for a minute. That's understandable, Christopher said. You're learning to trust again. That takes time. How do you know when it's safe? When someone has really changed. You watch their actions over time. Words are easy. Anyone can say sorry. But consistent action, day after day, month after month, that's what shows real change. Christopher paused. Has your dad done anything that makes you doubt his recovery? Grace thought carefully. No. He's been reliable. He's been respectful. He hasn't pushed for more than I'm ready to give. He's just been showing up consistently. Then maybe you can start relaxing a little. Not completely. Keep your boundaries. Keep watching. But maybe you can let him in just a bit more. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later. Grace had been sick with the flu, too exhausted to do much of anything. Richard called to check on her, something he'd been doing regularly. I'm fine, Grace said hoarsely. Just need rest. Who's taking care of Ben? Christopher's going to pick him up from school. I can handle dinner and everything once I feel a bit better. Let me help, Richard said. Let me pick Ben up, make dinner, get him started on homework. You need to rest. Grace hesitated. This would mean trusting Richard alone with Ben, something she hadn't done since he'd come back. But she was so tired, and Ben would be okay for a few hours. Okay, she agreed. But check in with me every hour. Richard did exactly what he promised. He picked up Ben, made them chicken soup, helped with homework, and had Ben in bed at his normal bedtime. He checked in every hour on the dot. When Grace dragged herself out of bed the next morning, the kitchen was clean and there was fresh orange juice in the fridge with a note. Feel better. Dad. Ben came down for breakfast. Dad was nice last night. He told me stories about when you were little. About how Mom used to sing to us before bed. She did, Grace said softly. She had a beautiful voice. I'm glad Dad came back, Ben said. I think he's really trying. Grace hugged her brother close. Yeah, buddy. I think he is too. The evening started like any other Thursday. Grace was at her desk in the community fund office, reviewing applications. Ben was at after-school care, and Richard was supposed to pick him up at 5. Christopher had stopped by to discuss expanding the housing program to include job training. Grace's phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Dad. Grace. His voice was tight with fear. I need you to listen carefully. Someone followed me from my apartment. A guy I used to know from before, when I was using. He knows about you and Ben. He knows about the community fund. He wants money. Grace's blood went cold. Where are you? I'm at the school parking lot with Ben. This guy is in his car behind me. He hasn't approached yet, but he's watching. I think he's waiting to follow us home. Christopher was already on his feet, phone out. What's wrong? Grace put her phone on speaker. Dad, Christopher's here. Tell us exactly what's happening. Richard explained quickly. The man's name was Derek Flynn. He'd been Richard's dealer before he went to rehab. Flynn had recently been arrested and needed bail money. Someone told him Richard's family had come into money through Christopher's help. He thinks you have cash, Richard said. He doesn't understand, it's not like that. I tried explaining, but he wouldn't listen. Grace, I'm so sorry. I brought this to your door. It's not your fault, Grace said firmly. Christopher, what do we do? Christopher was already calling someone. I'm getting security and police. Richard, stay in your car with the doors locked. Don't engage with him. We're coming to you. The drive to the school took 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours. Grace's mind raced with fear. Ben was there. Ben could get hurt. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of when Richard came back. This isn't Dad's fault, she said aloud, more to herself than Christopher. No, it's not, Christopher agreed. He did everything right. He called immediately. He protected Ben. He stayed sober through a stressful situation. That counts for something. Police cars were already at the school when they arrived. Richard's car was parked near the entrance, and behind it was an old sedan with Flynn inside. Officers surrounded the vehicle, and within minutes, they had Flynn in handcuffs. Grace ran to Richard's car. He got out, keeping Ben behind him protectively. "Are you okay? Is Ben okay?" "We're fine," Richard said shakily. "He never got out of his car. I didn't let him near us." Ben was pale but unharmed. Grace pulled him into her arms. "You're safe, buddy. Everything's okay." An officer came over. "I'm Officer Rebecca Stone. We've been looking for Flynn. He's got outstanding warrants. He's not going to be bothering you again." She looked at Richard. "You did the right thing, calling immediately. You kept your son safe." They gave statements to the police. Christopher ensured the school's security protocols would be reviewed. Richard sat with Ben the whole time, keeping him calm, answering his questions honestly but without scaring him. Afterward, Christopher drove them all back to Grace and Ben's house. Grace made hot chocolate while they sat in the living room, the fear slowly draining away. "I'm so sorry," Richard said again. "This is my past coming back to haunt you. I understand if you don't want me around anymore." "Stop," Grace said firmly. "What happened tonight showed me exactly why I should keep you around." Richard looked confused. "What?" "You protected Ben. You called for help. You stayed calm. You didn't panic. You didn't run. You didn't use this as an excuse to relapse." Grace sat down across from him. "You did everything right. That's what matters." Ben climbed into Richard's lap, something he hadn't done since he was very small. "I wasn't scared because Dad was there." Richard's arms came around his son, his eyes filling with tears. "I will always be there now. I promise. Nothing is going to make me leave again." Christopher watched the scene with a soft smile. Family isn't perfect people. It's imperfect people who don't give up on each other. Later, after Ben was asleep and Richard had reluctantly gone home, Grace and Christopher sat on the porch. "Are you okay?" Christopher asked. "I am, actually," Grace said. "Tonight could have been so much worse. But everyone did what they needed to do. Dad protected Ben. You came immediately. The police handled it well. We worked together." "Your dad has really changed," Christopher observed. "I was skeptical at first, I'll admit. But he proved himself tonight." "He's been proving himself for months," Grace said. "I just wasn't ready to fully trust it until now. But tonight showed me that he really is different. He didn't fall apart under pressure. He chose us." Have you ever had to decide whether to trust someone again after they hurt you? What did you choose? Share your story in the comments and subscribe to see how Grace's journey continues. The stars were bright overhead, the Austin night peaceful again. Grace thought about how far they'd come from that desperate day outside the grocery store. Ben was healthy. She had meaningful work. Her father was back in their lives, truly present this time. They had a community that cared. And they just survived a real threat by working together. "Thank you," Grace said to Christopher, "for everything. For that first day, for all the days since, for believing in us." "Thank you for letting me help," Christopher replied. "For teaching me that kindness really does change lives. You've inspired a whole community, Grace. You've shown people what's possible." Grace smiled. "We've shown them what's possible. All of us together. That's what community means." Inside, Ben slept peacefully, safe and loved. Outside, Grace and Christopher sat in comfortable silence, grateful for second chances, for forgiveness, for the power of people choosing to do the right thing. The threat had passed. The family had held together. And tomorrow would bring new opportunities to help others find their own second chances. 6 months after that frightening night, Grace stood at the podium in the brand new Austin Community Center. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the gathered crowd. Mayor Thompson sat in the front row beside Christopher. Local business leaders, community members, families who'd been helped by the fund, and reporters filled the chairs behind them. Ben sat between Richard and Christopher, his legs swinging with excitement. He wore his favorite red shirt, the one Grace had bought him for his 9th birthday last month. He looked healthy and happy, a normal kid living a normal life. Grace adjusted the microphone, her heart racing but her voice steady. She'd come a long way from that desperate 19-year-old begging for bread. She was 20 now, halfway through her first year at Austin Community College with perfect grades in her education program. She worked full-time at the community fund, helping dozens of families every week. and she was about to cut the ribbon on this new center, a place dedicated to giving families the support she'd once needed so desperately. "Thank you all for being here today," Grace began. "7 months ago, I was standing outside a grocery store, completely hopeless. My 8-year-old brother was dying. We had no food, no home, and no help. I thought we were going to die in that condemned apartment. I thought I'd failed him completely." She saw several people in the audience nodding, understanding in their expressions. Then a stranger stopped. Christopher Hayes asked me if I was okay. He listened to my story. And instead of walking away like everyone else had, he helped. He didn't just give me a meal. He gave me a future. Grace's voice grew stronger. But more than that, he showed me what community really means. He showed me that kindness isn't weakness. That accepting help isn't failure. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone else carry the load for a while. Christopher smiled from his seat, his eyes reflecting pride. "This building represents everything I've learned over these past months," Grace continued, gesturing to the modern facility behind her. "On the first floor, we have a food bank, a clothing closet, and a medical clinic where people can get basic health care without insurance. The second floor has meeting rooms where families can meet with counselors, financial advisors, and job placement specialists. The third floor has classrooms where people can learn new skills, earn their GED, or take college courses. And throughout the building, we have daycare services so parents can focus on getting back on their feet while knowing their children are safe." The audience applauded. Grace saw the young mother from the food bank, Susan Phillips with her daughter, Carol Martinez from the transitional housing program. So many people whose lives had been touched by the ripple of kindness that started with Christopher's choice to stop that day. "But this center is about more than services," Grace said. "It's about community. It's about people who've been where you are helping you find your way out. It's about mentors who've survived and recovered teaching others how to do the same. It's about breaking the cycle of shame and isolation that keeps people trapped." She paused, meeting her father's eyes. Richard wiped tears from his face. His recovery had held strong. He'd been promoted at work, moved into a better apartment, and attended every single one of Ben's soccer games. He and Grace had been working through their complicated relationship in family counseling, slowly rebuilding trust. "My dad is here today," Grace said. "He's in recovery from addiction. When I was desperate and alone, he wasn't there. He'd made terrible choices that hurt us deeply. But over these past months, he's shown up. Day after day, week after week. He's proven that people can change. That second chances matter. That it's never too late to become who you're meant to be." Richard stood up, and Grace saw the pride and love on his face. Ben grabbed his hand, and the three of them shared a moment across the crowded room. "This center carries my mother's name," Grace continued. "The Margaret Anderson Community Center. My mom died of cancer 4 months before I met Christopher. She was a single mother who worked 2 jobs to give us a good life. She taught me to fight. She taught me that loving your family means never giving up, even when it's hard, even when it hurts." Grace's voice broke slightly. "Mom, if you can see this, I hope you're proud. I hope you know that Ben and I are okay, that we survived, that we're helping others survive too." She took a deep breath. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible. Christopher Hayes, whose generosity started everything. Mayor Thompson and the City Council, who donated this property. The dozens of businesses and individuals who funded this building. Pastor Wilson and Grace Community Church, who've supported us from the beginning. Dr. Carter, who helped my family heal. And most importantly, every single person who's been helped by our programs and turned around to help someone else. That's how communities thrive. We'll lift each other up." The audience stood, applauding. Grace saw Linda Torres crying, Marcus Chen smiling broadly, Rebecca Stone in her police uniform looking proud. She saw families she'd helped, strangers whose lives had changed because someone chose kindness. "Before we cut this ribbon and open these doors, I want to say one more thing," Grace said. "If you're out there struggling right now, if you're where I was 7 months ago, please hear this. Don't give up. Help exists. People care. You're not alone." She looked directly at the cameras, knowing her words would reach beyond this room. "Let people help you. Accept the kindness. There's no shame in needing support. And when you're ready, When you're stable, pay it forward. Help the next person. That's how we change the world. One act of kindness at a time. Christopher joined her on the stage, handing her the ceremonial scissors. Ben and Richard came up too, and together, the four of them cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered as the doors opened and people streamed into the center. Grace gave tours throughout the afternoon. She showed the young mother from the food bank the childcare facilities. She introduced Susan Phillips to the medical staff who would help manage her daughter's diabetes. She watched Carol Martinez meet with families from the transitional housing program. Everywhere she looked, she saw hope being planted, futures being rebuilt, communities forming. Late in the afternoon, Christopher found her in the empty third-floor classroom. Grace stood at the window, looking out over Austin, the city that had almost broken her but ultimately saved her. Tired? Christopher asked. Happy, Grace corrected. I never thought I'd feel this way. 7 months ago, I couldn't imagine a future beyond the next meal. Now look at this. She gestured to the building around them. We built this. Because you chose kindness. Because I chose to accept help. Because a community decided everyone deserves a chance. You built this, Christopher said firmly. I provided some funding, but you had the vision. You understood what people needed because you'd lived it. This center exists because of your heart and your work. Grace turned to face him. I couldn't have done it without you. Without everyone who helped us. That's the whole point, isn't it? Christopher smiled. None of us do anything alone. We need each other. We save each other. They stood there together, watching through the window as families explored the center below. Grace saw Ben playing with other children in the daycare area, Richard talking with Pastor Wilson, Linda showing someone the food bank. What's next for you? Christopher asked. You're doing well in school. The community fund is thriving. The center is open. What do you want now? Grace thought about it. I want to finish college. Get my teaching degree. Maybe open more centers like this in other cities. I want to make sure no other kid goes through what Ben went through. I want to make sure no other sister stands outside a grocery store begging for help while hundreds of people walk past. She paused. And I want to keep telling our story. Because I think it gives people hope. You're already doing all of that, Christopher observed. You're 20 years old and you're changing lives. We're changing lives, Grace corrected. All of us together. That evening, Grace made dinner at home while Ben did homework at the kitchen table. Richard came over, something that happened regularly now. They'd settled into a routine that felt comfortable and safe. He helped with homework, stayed for dinner a few times a week, attended Ben's games and school events. They were a family again, different from before but still whole. Grace. Ben looked up from his math worksheet. My teacher wants me to write an essay about someone who changed my life. Can I write about you? You wrote about me last year, Grace reminded him with a smile. I know. But I want to write about you again. About how you never gave up on us. Ben's expression was serious. You saved me, Gracie. Grace knelt beside his chair. We saved each other, remember? We're a team. The best team, Ben agreed, hugging her tight. Later, after Ben was asleep and Richard had gone home, Grace sat on the porch with her laptop. She'd started writing a book about their experience, about the journey from desperation to hope. Her blog followers had asked for it, and she thought maybe her story could reach even more people in book form. She typed, "The day I stood outside that grocery store, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I still had love. I still had Ben. I still had the capacity to hope, even when hope seemed foolish. And when a stranger showed me kindness, when he chose to see me instead of walking past, everything changed. Not just for me, but for hundreds of other people whose lives have been touched by that single choice." Grace paused, looking at the stars overhead. She thought about her mom, about how proud she'd be. She thought about Christopher, about the ripple his kindness had created. She thought about her dad, about second chances and redemption. She thought about the families they'd helped, about the community they'd built. Most of all, she thought about hope. Real, tangible hope. The kind that survives even the darkest nights. The kind that says tomorrow can be better than today. The kind that transforms lives and builds communities and changes the world one person at a time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. Proud of you. Your mom would be proud too. See you tomorrow at the center. Grace smiled and typed back, thank you for seeing me that day. For stopping. For caring. You changed everything. You let me help, Christopher responded. That took courage too. Sleep well. Grace closed her laptop and went inside. Ben's soft breathing came from his room. Photos of their mom hung on the walls. Tomorrow she'd go to the center and help more families. She'd attend her evening classes. She'd keep building the life she'd fought so hard for. The journey from that desperate girl outside the grocery store to the young woman she was now hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and struggles, fears and doubts. But every step had been worth it. Every choice to accept help, to keep fighting, to believe in second chances had led her here. As Grace got ready for bed, she thought about the question she'd been asked at the ribbon cutting. What do you want people to learn from your story? She knew her answer now. She wanted people to learn that kindness matters, that community saves lives, that accepting help isn't weakness, that second chances can transform people, that hope is the most powerful force in the world. Most importantly, she wanted people to learn that one person choosing to stop, to see, to help can change everything. For one person, for one family, for an entire community. Christopher had chosen to help her. She'd chosen to accept that help. Together, they'd built something beautiful. And the ripples of that single act of kindness would continue spreading, touching lives for years to come. Grace turned off a light and thought about tomorrow. About the families she'd meet, the lives she'd touch, the hope she'd share. She thought about Ben, healthy and happy. About her dad, steady in his recovery. About the community that had saved them and that they were now helping to save others. She closed her eyes and smiled. This was what it meant to thrive. This was what it meant to pay kindness forward. This was what it meant to hope. And tomorrow, she'd wake up and do it all again. One family at a time. One act of kindness at a time. Building a world where no one had to beg for bread on cold concrete, where no child went hungry, where no person was invisible. That was her purpose now. That was her future. And it all started because one person chose to stop and ask, "Are you okay?" Sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything.